Chapter 2. The Chain Gang. From the way Sabrina arched her back, Scarlet thought the lioness was going to throw her off the saddle. "Tired, ma'am?" she asked the beast, but the lioness purred her assurances back to Scarlet, letting her know that she was fine. Scarlet looked around the grand entryways to the portals of the Basilica. She had often come to this place after a long day of patrolling, hoping that something familiar would pop from its gates. Sometimes she'd get a little excited at the sight of a purple uniform with gold trimming, but the face that was wearing it never matched the face of her friend. It was always just another random storm student making their way through Dragonspire. "Someday I'll stop waiting," she thought as she saw another student disappear through the Athenaeum gate. "Someday, when I'm not looking, there they'll be. Scarlet? Wonder if it'll be like old times, us three united, taking on the Spiral like gangbusters. Scarlet. Balance, ice, and storm, the unbeatable combo. Scarlet!" She looked up to see the half face of a ninja. He was a grand, like her, wearing light gray robes and holding a light gray katana. His hood took away a lot of his features, leaving his eyes to do most of the talking. He stared at her inquisitively, waiting for her to respond. "I'm sorry, what?" "Do you want to PvP?" he asked. "PV... what?" "PvP, player versus player, the arena." He seemed a little surprised to be explaining this to her, although not as much as she was to be asked. When she was a novice, Scarlet did try battling a time or two in the game, but as the war began, Scarlet did most of her battling outside Wizard City. She had been so busy patrolling that she barely had enough time to enjoy things at home. "We're going to set a match for 4 versus 4. Do you want to join?" "I don't know, Oh, come on, please. I'm sure with the arena tickets you'd win, you could save up and buy yourself something real nice." "Arena tickets? Shopping? Nice stuff? Shopping? Okay, I'm game." She walked up to the podium outside the arena. The quill and parchment floated lightly above the stand, waiting for her to scroll her name next to the rest of her teammates. Aside from their names and rank, she barely knew them. One was a friend of his, and the other he found in the Basilica after her. She had never seen or talked to them before. She may have come across them while trekking between worlds, but not enough to stop and get a name, or to add them into her address book with her other friends. It seemed weird for her to be lumped with strangers like this, but the lure of shopping was too much for her to ignore. Plus, her mind desperately wanted something to do other than wait around for something to happen. Alex, the masked wizard ninja, insisted everything was cool, and that the 4 of them would be an unbeatable combo. "I'm sure, with you being a grand, that you know how to cast Frost Giant." "Of course, was just doing that before I saw you," she said lazily. "Awesome!" Alex laughed as he walked over to sign his name to their team. His eyes seemed to sparkle, as if he were pleased with her response. She could only imagine the wide grin that was spreading underneath his scarf. It was taking a while for the match to start, so Scarlet perused a brochure of items that could be bought with arena tickets. "See something you like?" Scarlet hadn't seen Professor Diego in ages. Time didn't look like it passed for him in the way it did for her. The majestic stallion towered over her, flashing his charming smile at his young pupil. "Nothing yet, sir." "You know, Scarlet, I don't see you here as often as I've seen some others, particularly your comrades." His long snout flicked in the direction of Alex and his friends. Diego's eyebrow rose a bit as he looked from them to her. "Oh, I just met them. They asked me to play." "Ah," he said. "Besides, you know I'm not one to play around here for sport." "Well," Professor Diego looked at his own fencing blade as he spoke, "I suppose it is easier to fight a common foe than a would-be friend." He raised it up some so that the metal caught the light. He smiled at it, then quickly slashed it through the air, performing a series of moves that caused the crowd around him to gasp in awe and applause. He turned to bow to Scarlet, who was clapping along with the rest of the audience. "Oh," she said, as she saw her team's name appear at the front of the battle queue. "I guess we'll be going in shortly." Professor Diego nodded as he saw her name up with the others. "Well then, hope you do well, and fight honorably." Sure, you know I will, she said, perplexed by his statement. As she was about to enter, she felt his hoof gently touch her shoulder. Be careful of the company you keep, Scarlet Junestaff. He gave a wary smile to her, just before her teammates passed. Come on, Scar, time to battle, said Alex excitedly as he headed in. She waved back at Professor Diego before she was teleported to the site. The concerned look on his face left her a little curious as to what he was saying. Scarlet, said Alex, all I want you to do when you fight is to cast Giant. Blaze will cast Stormlord. Giant? Just Giant? What about Colossus and Ren, or my Blizzard? Giant is all we need, he replied as he stepped to the ring. And what will you be doing? But before she could get an answer, the bell sounded and the countdown had begun. Scarlet made some quick adjustments as she prepared to fight. They were given the first move in the square off. Since it took time to summon her giant, she used the rounds to shield and blade herself before she was able to cast. She looked over to see that Blaze was doing the same. She had seen Esme use Stormlord before, so she knew it wasn't an easy task to cast. The other two next to her were doing something she hadn't seen. Alex, her masked comrade, waved his wand, showing a dazzling symbol before it popped into tiny, brilliant particles of light. One by one, their opponents were stunned. A good opener, she thought, as she watched as their challengers stood frozen in their place. She put a shield up and watched Blaze do the same. But then, another stun spell, from Alex's other friend. She opened her mind to ask him, This is chain stunning? Right, he replied back as he readied himself for the next round. Isn't this wrong? Illegal? No, everyone does it, he said as he cast out his spell, another stun. Really? She thought as she put up another shield. You must not PvP all that often, he said. Again, their opponents continued to just stand there, frozen in their place. Some were grimacing in anger, as the other man sent out another stun as well. No, this isn't something I'm used to. She was used to the smack talk, the hard-hitting attacks that took her breath away, and even losing to a better opponent, but never stun. She was never stunned herself in her tries in the arena. She didn't recall being stunned in any of her quests around the spiral. Has Malistaire ever stunned? If he'd stunned like this, she wouldn't be in this position. She'd be lying face down on the cold floor of the Basilica, wondering what happened. Giant ready? The question woke her out of her confusion. Since her opponents couldn't attack, the rounds were going by so quick that she had enough power to summon. The Frost Giant was ready. And everyone is doing this, Scarlet asked him as he cast out another stun. But his answer was no surprise to her. Alex nodded in agreement as he continued to keep their opponents frozen. With a shrug of her shoulders, she cast out her powerful attack. Maybe I'll fizzle, she half-hoped as she wished for the match to be over. Unfortunately, for those on the other team, the spell went off without a hitch. A good amount of their health was taken as the giant lowered his hammer onto the opposing team. Blaze was ready with his follow-up and cast out Stormlord after Scarlet. They were dropping like flies. A few quick rounds later, it was done. The 10 arena tickets popped into her hands. Port away quickly, said Alex as he disappeared from the arena. Scarlet was so scared and confused that the only place she thought to port to was her home. She stood in the middle of her street, near her apartment. Her heart was racing as she looked around the area. Was I followed? But how could I be? They don't know me, do they? She felt so guilty, so ashamed of what she had participated in. It almost felt like she had committed murder in front of millions. If only they had fought back, the victory would have been much sweeter. She looked down at her compass and saw a blip on the glass. The compass was something that told her where her friends were on the spiral, allowed her to port to them if needed. But she didn't want to visit. She felt too ashamed to show her face anywhere at the moment. Hey, she called out in her mind to Chris Deathweaver. I was playing in the arena and did something horrible. What, you proved your title as Fizzlemaster? He said with a stifled laugh. No, you! On any other day, she would run with his jibe, but not today. I chain stunned, Oh. She waited for more of his response, but his pause was so long that she wondered if he were removing her from his friends list. Oh? Scarlet prodded. Scarlet, it's just a game. It's nothing like the spiral. I'm sure it has its advantages. Yeah, but I don't know. She thought about it for a long moment before she thought of something else too. This guy said that everyone was doing it. Maybe so, but I wouldn't dwell on it. But she was. She felt like a criminal. Goodness, woman, you don't see me complaining when people buy stuff from the Crown Shop while others go to the bazaar. She felt her stomach plunge like a coaster over a steep hill. Her new celestial trident she was gripping onto still had that new wand smell. It still glowed just as brightly from the day she bought it. It even changed color with her mood, which was icy blue at the moment. Why you gotta go there with my shopping? She heard Chris let out his laugh this time. Just kidding. Stop whining and go play. So she did. She teleported back to the arena, to the same spot where she had left her newly acquired team. Alex's eyes brightened as she walked over in his direction. We were waiting on you, he said with a hint of glee. Scarlet walked over to the podium and signed her name next to theirs once more. Moments later, they entered the arena to start battling again. As time passed, Scarlet's backpack was getting heavy with tickets. After a while, she didn't feel as bad for playing along with the guys and their stunning technique. There was one group that seemed to always come up against them in the battle queue, and just like Alex had said before, they were stunners too. She realized this fact when Karma turned the tides and allowed them to go first. It was an interesting predicament to be beaten by their own plan. There was no strategy to get out of the cycle, but to just grin and bear it. Your only hope was that someone would fizzle so you could cast your spell, but it didn't happen, and she was glad to have experienced it. It almost felt like things were right again, like the universe had taught her a much-needed lesson. It had gotten late, and the team dispersed for a much-needed break. Scarlet decided to use her time to catch up with a friend that appeared on her compass. When she teleported, she found herself back in the arena again, but this time, things were different. There wasn't that silent intensity that she had experienced before. There was a lot of joking and laughing going about at Mason's expense. Mason Moonmask was an experienced veteran of the arena, but also a practical joker at heart. He loved tricking his friends into a game or two, just so that he could show off his defensive skills. He seemed to have a full audience at his control as he played through a game of 2-on-2. Die, Mason! Yelled out his female opponent, but her attack only left him in a fit of giggles. His shield had taken up the brunt of her blow. In the end, Mason won out, but at the expense of his healer, who suffered most of the attacks that were meant for him. But there was no hard feelings or harsh remarks made. Everyone congratulated each other and stuck around for more laughs as they tried to set up another match. Something Scarlet was not used to seeing. Well, look who has come down from her high horse, Mason greeted. She had known Mason for a while, not as long as Esme and Boris, but still long enough to call him friend. She had never been shy talking to him before, but for some reason she felt very amateur in his presence here. Good game, Scarlet managed to say. Meh, it was nothing, but it makes for good practice, he said. More people came up to joke with him. It was interesting to see how respected he was, even after the thorough beating he delivered. I see you use a lot of your shields, Scarlet said, as she tried to lead up to a question she wanted to ask the vet. Shielding is always good. It protects you and helps you store up for a major attack. Right, she said. So, do you chain stun? What? Mason looked stunned himself to be asked. For Merlin's sake, no. Hate chain stunning. It's cowardly. I've stunned in matches, but never over and over. Even in my run-ins with Malistaire, I don't think he ever stunned. He went on to say more, but Scarlet was too embarrassed to pay attention. Why you ask? You doubt my abilities or something? Of course not, Mason. Just a question about your gameplay, that's all. Scarlet scoffed as she tried to hide her own secret. Well, why don't you play me since you've got questions? He laughed as he approached her with his wand aimed at her head playfully. Scarlet backed away with her hands up in surrender. I really must be going. Maybe next time. But it was too late. Before she knew it, Mason had backed her into the ring. The countdown started, and he jumped in, ready to fight her. "Sweet," he said, as he cast out his first spell, a stun. How fitting. As the match closed, Mason offered tips on how she could improve on her gameplay. She took his advice in stride. After all, he was a veteran and well-respected fighter in the arena, so it was all good to her. He didn't bring up the chain-stunning question, and she put it out of her mind, as well as removed Alex from her book. It occurred to her why it felt funny to stun, something that Professor Diego was telling her before. It didn't feel honorable. As many bosses and minions she had faced between worlds, she had never pulled out a stun to defeat them, and within that experience, they had never stunned to defeat her. Some may have cheated and used dirty tricks to get their way, but regardless of the tactic, they still fought hard, exchanging blow for blow till only one was left standing. She was never afraid of a fight. "Young wizard!" She looked at her compass to see the strange face of something bug-eyed and green. "I need your assistance immediately. Come to my classroom straight away." "Yes, Professor Ballstrom." At last, something different to do.